Hello, Jessica Frost-Ballas here with the newest installment of the Interactive Cards by Jess series for Simon Says Stamp. Today I'm sharing what I like to call a trifold window shaker card. That might not be the correct technical term, but I think it accurately describes what's happening. I saw the idea for building 3 scenes on a trifold card from a crafty friend and decided to take it one step further to create a shaker card as well. So let's get started. To start, I stamped the images from Summer Cuddly Critters onto Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock with Copic-friendly intense black ink. Then I colored the images with Copic markers. I'll include the exact colors I used on the accompanying blog post. Once I'm finished coloring, I die cut the images with the coordinating dies. Next, I create the base for my trifold card. I wanted to avoid having to glue panels together, so I use a slightly smaller 4-bar card size. I cut a piece of 110-pound cardstock to 10.5 inches long by 4 7/8 tall. Then I score it at 3.5 inches on both ends. I use a bone folder to carefully fold and score the cardstock. At this point, when you fold it together to create a trifold card, it doesn't lay completely flat because both ends are scored to exactly the same length. So I trim just a sliver off the end of the right side so that it will lay flat when folded. I don't have a specific measurement for that because literally it's less than 1/8 of an inch. Just barely enough so that the card will lay flat. Next, it's time to create the backgrounds for each scene. First, I use Post-it tape to mask off the inside center panel. Working on a diagonal, I blend Distress Oxide inks in Peacock Feathers, Mermaid Lagoon, and Blueprint Sketch across the panel. I dry it with my heat gun and then place the Brushstrokes Wave stencil from Studio Katia over the panel. I spray water over the stencil and let it sit for a few seconds before blotting off the excess water with a paper towel to create a lighter stenciled image. I also spray the entire panel with my spritz bottle and blot off the excess before drying it with my heat gun. I love the texture you can achieve with water over Distress Oxides. Once that's dry, I turn over the panel and decorate the left edge, which will become the middle panel of my trifold card. I mask off the edge and blend Blueprint Sketch and Salty Ocean Distress Oxides on a diagonal to create a shoreline. Then I add antique linen to the bottom of the panel. I blend the Salty Ocean to meet the antique linen. Finally, I add a touch of vintage photo to the bottom of the panel to create a little dimension and soften the edges with my antique linen blending tool. I also spray this panel with water and blot off the excess before setting it with my heat gun. Finally, I decorate the right edge, which will become the front of my trifold card. I mask off the edge and blend antique linen Distress Oxide ink over the entire panel to create my beach. I add vintage photo along the left side and bottom of the panel and blend it out with antique linen. I spray the panel with water and blot off the excess once more before setting it with my heat gun. And those are my 3 finished backgrounds. Once everything is totally dry, I die cut a rectangle from the center panel using the Wonky Rectangles die from Simon Says Stamp. This will become my shaker panel. If you want a flatter card, you could easily skip this step and just create your windows. Next, I trim a piece of soft navy cardstock to 3.5 inches by 4 7/8. I line it up behind my shaker frame and add adhesive to the middle. Then I carefully inlay the shaker panel inside the shaker frame to make sure it will be evenly centered later. Next, it's time to die cut my mermaid kitty. I actually did this incorrectly in my video, so do as I say, not as I did. You should die cut the cat from what will become the front of your card first. I accidentally die cut the middle flap of the card first. Once it's die cut, close the flaps and trace the outline of the cat die on the second flap. This is where I made my error, as the front panel is slightly larger than the middle panel, which meant my cat wasn't totally lined up correctly. If I had die cut from the front panel first, my card would have been totally flat when I traced the cat outline. It did work out just fine in the end, but for an even more perfect fit, definitely die cut the front panel of the card first. Anyway, once you trace the cat, lay the die down carefully over the trace line and die cut it again to create the window openings. Then I place thin pieces of score tape along the back of my shaker frame and adhere a piece of acetate over it. I also run my powder tool along the edges to get rid of any sticky areas. I want to stamp sentiments on the middle and back panels of the card, so I place the card panel in my MISTI and position the sentiment from Hello Beautiful from Simon Says Stamp on my panel using a plastic grid to help me line things up. I close the lid to pick up the stamp and then stamp it with intense black ink. Then I stamp the sentiment from Summer Cuddly Critters onto the inside of the shaker panel with VersaFine and heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. Next, I place a thin layer of foam mounting tape along the edges of my shaker frame and fill it with sparkling clear confetti that reminds me of bubbles. I seal up the shaker using the soft navy cardstock panel and give it a shake just to make sure everything is sealed tightly. Then I add a single layer of foam mounting tape to the back of my cat, close the card panels and carefully adhere her inside the window. I also add my starfish and umbrella. When you close the card panels, you can carefully tuck them slightly behind the cat to hold them in place. This is actually a fairly thin card since it only has a single layer of foam mounting tape, and if you skipped the shaker portion it would be even flatter. As a shaker, since it's smaller, it fits easily into a regular A2 envelope. I love how the mermaid kitty starts out on the beach and ends up in the water. Sounds like my idea of a perfect beach day too. And that's it. I hope this inspires you to try creating a trifold window shaker card. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll be back next month with a new interactive card. Have a fantastic day, and until next time, happy crafting! Bye!